Alright, so this weekend's episodes for Antenna TV were Fairy Tale and Monkees Watch Their Feet. And in one of my last videos, I briefly touch on that I love Fairy Tale, but I don't really like Monkees Watch Their Feet. I watched it and I wrote down kind of the reasons why that episode doesn't appeal to me. So first is the awkward format. The entire episode is narrated by a monotonous spokesperson. Though he does offer some comedy, I feel like the only reason you'd laugh is because of how he's sort of satirically mocking a boring newscaster. Next is the episode doesn't flow. The moment his TomTom disappears, Mickey turns around to see that it's missing, when he wouldn't even be paying attention to it in the first place. And then when his clothes disappear, he's in a robe out on the beach looking for them. And yes, the aliens wanted to put them on the beach to lure him, but if your clothes just disappear off your body, why would you think the first place to look is on the beach outside of your house? It doesn't add up. They could have been so much more creative with the aliens. The girl has her hair lopsided and they're both wearing tights and flashy clothes, but the only distinction that they're not human is just that they're painted a gray, light bluish green color, and that's it. I mean, Michikojo, or however you say that, looks more like an alien than these two. Another problem is the script. The scripts for their other episodes give them freedom to improv, but this one seems like all the craziness, the silliness, the faces, everything is forced. And when they first make the robot, Mickey is kept on the spaceship, and the aliens say they want to keep them there to question him, but we never see any of that, and that really bothers me. It's like, if you want to put that in your script, then there should have been some of that, but it was all focused on Peter and Davy dealing with the robot. I mean, I understand that they would say that just so we understand, oh, Mickey's on the spaceship, and this is the robot, and we're watching the story of the boys and the robot, but it's like, if you're going to say that, then include some of that in the story. So that was that rant, and that's kind of why I don't really like that episode. But I watched it a couple of times just to make sure I didn't miss anything else that I didn't like. And the second time, okay, this is going to seem, you're going to think I'm either crazy or you're going to think, oh, I get how you'd see that. But the more I watched it, the more it was just so obvious that it was a protest against war and the government. And I know that sounds really weird because it's about an alien creating a robot clone of Mickey, but if you really listen to what the narrator is saying, it really does sound like a protest against war. So I've written down the quotes that really make it sound like it is the protest. When we're first introduced, after Mike does his little introduction of the secretary of the Department of UFO, the secretary, the guy, I'm just gonna call him the narrator, he introduces it with this. Day by day, there's increasing evidence of the alienation of our planet. Many of us blame our leaders, many of our leaders blame us, but the truth lies, as always, beyond our reach. We're being attacked by outer space. These invaders, these aliens from outer space, have cleverly infiltrated our societies, preying mostly upon the innocence of our youth because they know they'll try anything. The universe is trying to move into your neighborhood. Take, planet and outer space and universe and aliens, whatever. If you switch those words to government, then it makes sense. So this is kind of the introduction of how the government is trying to appeal to the younger generation. I remember watching an interview with the boys, and they said that the whole idea of the monkees, of the 4 young adults living alone, was because back then you couldn't trust adults. All they were for was war. So you couldn't trust adults. And it just, it all makes sense after seeing this for the second time and realizing all this junk. When Mickey is really confused about his clothes going missing, this is what he says. Confusion, it's a seed sown into our most fertile ground, our youth, deeply troubled by the problems of growing up. twisted by a mechanistic world that moves faster than the speed of sound. And then he starts to get like really blunt about it, and I'm not sure if this is like a comparison or if they really were being like satirically blunt about it. But he says, tormented by a war he must fight in a country thousands of miles away. And then he gets sarcastic about it and says, surely simple problems such as these could not cause such confusion. He's obviously affected by aliens from outer space, or affected by our government. He's just explaining how young minds are consumed with all these problems about growing up, and once the government sees how vulnerable and like amiable our minds are, they're gonna see that as their chance to introduce the idea of war. As Mickey is going down the beach and he's collecting his clothes and his tom-tom and an extra stocking, the narrator says, the aliens have left a trail of precious possessions as the final step to lead him to their lair. If you look at this from like the protest standpoint, which is what I'm trying to convey right now, it's like precious possession is what the government is going to use. Not like physical things, but they're going to say, oh, you're fighting for this, you're fighting for your country and your freedom, and they're going to use those precious possessions and try to convince you that yes, war is the right thing and those things are what you're fighting for. When Mickey makes it to their spaceship, the narrator says, they prey upon his youthful curiosity. Their most effective weapon is one known as the duplicating process. They try to recreate a robot that looks exactly like a teenage boy. Now this is getting into the transformation of a boy into a soldier. The duplicating process is poking fun at the fact that every soldier is basically just a copy from the mold. And then the aliens try to clone Mickey and make him a robot, and it doesn't turn out right the first time. And the girl alien says, let's reduce the brain tissue and lower the IQ. Now this seems very touchy, but to me, it's basically saying that to fight in a war, all you need to know is how to fight. You don't need a brain, you don't need to know how to think for yourself, you just need to obey orders. And then they get into this subject about what the aliens are causing, or in this case, the government. And the narrator says, the aliens are causing riots and crime waves, drug addiction, unemployment, etc. They want to put the blame on teenagers. Take the war, for example. Whose fault is it? Certainly not our fault. We're not fighting. It must be those crazy kids. They're the ones doing all the fighting. But is it the kids' fault? Not entirely. Mostly it's the aliens. Are we to be pushovers for the universe? Let's show the cosmos what we're made of. This is like taking the point of view from the government and being sarcastic about it and saying if there is someone to put the blame on, then it can't be the government because the government's not the one fighting, it's all the soldiers. But then he goes on to say, if we're the teenagers and we're being blamed for everything, then let's stop letting them put the blame on us. They made us who we are, but now we should be standing up and showing them what we were meant to be. It's like this hidden protest speech. So when alien Mickey is in the boys' house, he refers to it as enemy headquarters. They're not aliens, so they must be against them. And I see that as symbolic, like if you're not for the war, if you're not with the government, then you have to be, like, you must be against it. And at the very end of the whole thing, he says, in summation, let me say once more emphatically, we are being attacked by outer space. The time has come for us to stop sticking our bayonets into each other and start sticking our bayonets into space. So this is like saying it's time to stop fighting against each other with all these little problems. It's just like, it's nonsense. Like there's a bigger problem. We shouldn't be against each other. We should all be fighting against war. But not actually fighting, because that's war. You know what I'm saying. Okay, so that was like my whole rant on monkeys watch their feet. Probably, you know what, who's to say that it's actually a protest thing, but you know, if it's not, then whatever, that's just my interpretation of it, and seeing it that way just made me really appreciate it.